right. So I would love to welcome you, Brandy, to this interview, and thank you so much for joining with me.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so I want to give people a little bit of a background. I first met you, I think first was Mojo Mastery when you were cooking. So it's a cooking class that Marcy Goldman does, and I just remember like you were just like this whiz with the vegetables and the things that you were cooking, and you're so creative and talented and knowledgeable. And you made this beautiful medley of the most divine colors I've ever seen. And then we connected more deeply in Tulum, Mexico. We were both there with Sarah Avant Stover's The Way of the Happy Woman yoga teacher training, and you were actually assisting in that.
hmm
So you are a chef and a an entrepreneur, and you're also a yogini, and you coach now women in online programs to help them to really heal, right, through food. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your business and like how you think of yourself?
Sure. Um, I think of myself primarily as a nutrition coach and having a supplemental kind of background as a chef. I do cook for people a little bit now and then, but not primarily in the way that I once did. So I used to be a personal chef for people who had different conditions that they were trying to heal with modified diets and really learning how to cook in a way that feels really nourishing and attainable. So I still use all of those pieces of my chef background, but mostly I work with people now doing nutrition coaching. And I also teach actually at a holistic culinary school, so I do still get to teach cooking on a smaller scale basis, which is really fun for me. But as far as in my business, I'm certified as what's called a transformational nutrition coach, and I feel so connected to that title because the program in which I learned from, I felt connected with before I even got into it because of what you mentioned earlier, my yogi background. So the transformational nutrition coaching is really a platform in which you take the science, the psychology, and the spirituality of healing through food and use that together.
That's so awesome. I love that because food is such a healing thing, and it's like a spiritual thing. I mean, the connection with the earth and growing food and knowing where it comes from. And then I think there's nothing more empowering than being able to cook your own meals and know that it's healthy and what your body wants. So how did you get into this? How did this become your calling?
Sure. So it was really a divine intervention that I came to study culinary arts in this holistic realm. I actually attended a retreat that was a yoga food retreat, and I realized when I left there that I knew a lot about food, and somehow, some way, suddenly I was looking at a school that did holistic nutrition, and so I found myself going into that program, and I really was not much of a cook before. I mean, I did cook, but I didn't know a lot of basics, and so I went into it just following my heart. And when I completed that program, I realized that I had been eating what I thought was really healthy, but in retrospect, I'd actually been really quite digestively ill for, I'd say, about 10 years. And so I realized at that moment that if I was eating in this way that was meant to be really holistic and healing, and I was still feeling sick, maybe there was something else underneath that. And so I actually decided to investigate that with some different practitioners, and I eventually learned that I had Crohn's disease, which is an inflammatory digestive disease. And so I then started to look at how I could help people based on the knowledge I was learning about myself through my own healing journey. And through that experience of healing myself, I used food as a foundation, but there were so many other factors that came into it. And the basis around food really came in my healing when I started taking different foods out of my diet and doing elimination diets and working on gut health. And so I just saw so many things that could change when you started to heal the gut. And so as a foundation for healing the body and therefore healing my own Crohn's disease, I took that out greater into the world and used the practices from food and beyond that I used in my healing journey and started to share that with other people and see lots of successes. And so then I created what I now have as a 6-week program that's based really primarily in this elimination diet and the other ways in which you heal your gut to change your life.
Yeah. That's awesome. I have done an elimination diet one time when I was in Marcy's program. So I eliminated all these foods, soy and dairy and sugar and like all this stuff, right? And I felt better than ever. I felt so jazzed. It was amazing. So what would you say to someone who's struggling with their diet? They don't eat that well, maybe they don't know how or they don't have time. What is like 1 or 2 tips you could give them to just start?
It's a really hard question. There are some foods that I think most people shouldn't be eating, at least in North America, and one of those foods is gluten. And so taking gluten out of the diet can lead to a lot of healing for a lot of different conditions, including just sluggishness and fatigue and things that we sometimes think are just part of life, but really aren't or don't have to be. So taking gluten out of the diet is a big one. And then there are kind of 3 other foods that I consider equal, which are dairy, corn, and soy. And so the primary reason behind those is that they're really hard to source in a clean way. And traditionally eaten, those foods would be raw dairy or fermented soy or, non-GMO, non-pesticide corn. And those items tend to make up a bulk of a lot of what we find in our American food or North American food system. So those are a couple of things as far as foods that could make a difference. In general, I like to suggest really taking the time to make your own foods, even if you don't feel like you have the time to do so. The time it takes to go to a restaurant and sit down and pay for someone else to make your meal and, all the things around that, you can actually make your meal is much more efficiently if you did it for yourself. And so sometimes people just don't have the confidence to do that. And so it's just like, building the stamina and feeling comfortable to just get in the kitchen and start playing with a few things. So taking out a couple of food groups, starting to just connect with your food and start to make your own meals are a huge piece to any sort of healing journey when it comes to food, because when you're making food at home, you know exactly what you're eating. Right. Even if you go to a healthful restaurant, they might be using oils or sauces or things that you really don't know what are in them. And so it's much more of a connective and knowing process when you're making your own foods.
Yeah, right. So true. So people can follow you on Instagram like I do and also look at your website because you take pictures and share really simple ways to travel, and take a lunch with you, or if you're on the road or something, snacks that are healthy and things like that. So where can people find you on Instagram or on your website to get some resources?
So my website is my name, BrandyMcKenzie.com, Brandy with an I, McKenzie, MacKenzie. So BrandyMcKenzie.com. And if you went to my website, you could find my Instagram feed at the bottom of each page, and then you could go through and follow it there. But my handle on Instagram is BH_Mackenzie.
Okay, that's great. I think people should go there because you really make it fun and easy and you have a lot of good tips. So tell me, how important is food in someone, in their spirit and their mind and their body? Like, does it really matter?
I really believe it does. So on a cellular level, we're constantly rebuilding our bodies. We have a completely new human body in about 7 years, they say, on a cellular level. We rebuild over and over. You know, our skin sloughs off, our fingernails grow, our hair, all that stuff. So from that perspective, we have to have nutrients to rebuild our cells. So I consider food to be very foundational in the way that we are a human being. So on that, again, cellular level. In regard to what I call gut health, which is really working with the digestive system, the gut can be truthfully anywhere from mouth to anus. But when I talk about the gut, I usually mean the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine. When there's any sort of disruption there, and typically speaking, no matter how much mindfulness you have around eating, if you've eaten a standard American diet in any part of your life, even if it's not now, or if you've done traveling and eaten cultural foods in other places, whether it's, you know, a third world country or not, there are just different microbiomes or layers of bacteria and things that are living in other food systems. So when we go into another country, for instance, and we're eating foods there, we encounter this whole other realm of bacteria that may be great for the people who live there, but maybe a little different for our bodies. So with that said, there's typically some kind of imbalance that most of us are dealing with in our digestive system if we're not specifically targeting that. And so coming in and working on the gut health, it's really a foundation for our entire health system. So when I used the word before, microbiome, that is kind of a new term that's becoming more popular in the nutrition world. And that is indicative of both the good and the bad bacteria and fungus and yeast and all of these other things that live in our body. So the good flora and fauna, as you could think of it. When the good and the bad become imbalanced, it can create a lot of disruption. So it can create inflammation in the body, which can lead to lots of disease in the body. It can create really a stagnation or a fogginess that moves into the realm of our brain. It also moves into the realm of our interconnection. So it can really be disruptive of the way we our brain is functioning from a thought level, but also from how we feel or connect with our inner world. So to me, and I know in your work, that's a huge piece of how to live in our human bodies in this experience. And so there can really be a disconnection that can get more clear and connected as you clean up your gut.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, you have so much information. I love it. That's awesome. It's true. There's a lot to think about there. Because I have read, you know, that I think it's like Ayurveda and different studies that really believe that it all originates in the gut. That our health is really determined by that. Do you believe that?
I absolutely believe that. Yeah. And what's great is that you just referenced something like Ayurveda that's an ancient science, right? And so in this North American culture, there's been a lot of conflicting science over the years, and I think that there are finally some doctors and scientists and real forward-thinking people that are looking back at that ancient information and sort of reconnecting to this place of that microbiome world and showing us that that different bacteria that we've encountered as we've evolved have not always served us, and that we have to sort of come back to this place of balance.
Yeah. So you are gluten-free, but you eat meat, right?
I do.
So what do you call your diet? Like, if people were curious.
Sure. I eat most closely to what is like a paleo diet, but in the autoimmune protocol realm. So a paleo diet is free of refined dairy, it's free of grains and legumes, and also refined sugars. In the autoimmune protocol, you also take out things like eggs and seeds and nuts and nightshades, which are a family of foods that include peppers, tomatoes, and potatoes. So while I don't follow that autoimmune protocol 100% all of the time, it's what I most closely follow most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to me, you seem really disciplined. You know, not only just in the fact, you know, that you follow this diet, you know, fairly well, but also being an entrepreneur and having online courses and practicing yoga and other things to keep yourself connected and healthy. Where do you think that comes from, that sense of discipline?
Um, it's funny. I really believe to a certain degree I was born with this sense of drive.
Mm-hmm.
That I've always been really willing to do what it takes to get to an end point. And, you know, sometimes that serves me, and sometimes I really have to find balance in that and make sure that I'm not pushing too hard, that I do give myself time to recuperate or, you know, whatever I need to create balance. But, you know, when it comes to food specifically, you know, actually I can use this as in relation to anything. I have a drive to be successful in what I do, and so I'm willing to take the steps to get to that success. If it feels, what's the word I want to use? Like, if it feels really potent to me, if it feels like something I really desire, then I'm willing to put some parameters in place to make it happen. So in regard to food specifically, I was very uncomfortable digestively for 10 years. And one of the reasons why I didn't realize I was actually sick is because that was something normal in my family. There was digestive autoimmune disease in my family. And so what I saw day to day that I thought was normal was really not anywhere close to normal. So when I learned that I would feel better and did feel better as I started to change my diet, for me, I could live a really vibrant life if I put structure in place around food. And I could feel really amazing, both physically and mentally and emotionally and with that inner connection. Whereas when that wasn't in place, you know, life was good, great at times, but there was a lot of struggle.
Wow. That's really inspiring, and probably true for a lot of people, that it's like the water that we swim in. You know, when you're a fish in water, you don't know what you're in. And so many Americans see unhealthy people because of their diet and just assume that that's normal, that we just have all these diseases and cancer and all this stuff, when really I think we're on the trend to know that this comes from our food, and it comes from the chemicals that we use and what we're exposed to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really inspiring. So, this drive that you have, you know, it reminds me of spirit, of chispa, of that life force. So, what is the soul to you? Like, what is the divine?
So, to me, the divine, for me, is my soul. And my soul is very distinct from any other soul. And when I think about my soul, the way I can translate it most easily is my own individuality and authenticity.
Yeah, that's great. And so, with that soul that is uniquely you, and you're driven, you have this vision, this ideal, how do you know when you're on track? How do you know that you're living your life guided by that?
That's a great question. To be honest, it changes a bit. You know, for me personally, when I come up against something that challenges my authenticity or asks me to be out of my authenticity, I really get physical sensation about it. So my body is really my tuning fork, you could say. So I can feel physically when I'm bumping up against something. And just in the way that I am, I just can feel really easily when something's a yes or no for me.
Mm-hmm.
And often I don't need to mull over something to make a decision. Like if it's right for me, my body just knows.
Mm-hmm.
My body, my inner wisdom, my soul, it's just a yes for me. There's a phrase that's used, I think by Chris Carr, I think maybe is who uses this phrase, but she says when something's a full body yes for her,
mm-hmm.
then that's a yes. And that's true for me also. It's like it really is multifaceted. So it's really just being willing to hear that, even when I don't necessarily want to. Mm-hmm. So like if there's something my ego or my mind wants to do, but my body gives me those signals against it, it's being willing to listen to that and follow that and know that it's taking me in the right direction, which is, the hardest part.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Do you think that that's always been that way? That you've always just had that knowing?
To a certain degree, yes. In reflection of my life growing up, I was always considered more rebellious or blunt or truth-telling in a way that people didn't really like.
Yeah.
Whether it was my family or, my teachers or my friends. And so, yes, I would say yes, I've always been that way. And it was that, backlash of, oh, you can't speak up, or this is not societally appropriate, or, whatever it was that was kind of pushed up against me my whole life, that certainly I came to a place where I repressed it more. But it's part of, for me, like there's no other way for me to live my life other than being an entrepreneur, because the way I know is right for me is the way I have to do it. And so I can't walk into a system and feel totally free and comfortable and authentic. And so, I think it's always been there.
I love that. I love that. And so in the psychic world, we call that, the knowing is clear cognizance, like you just know, or clear sentience, like just clear feeling in the body. Do you relate to that word?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so for people who are like you, who are watching, who want to be an entrepreneur because they want to do it their way, what would you recommend? Like, how do you do it? How'd you get started? What's some advice you could give?
The biggest piece of advice that I would give is to try and really be in that knowing and be in your authenticity, because I think when we look at other entrepreneurs or look at other people, mentors who we respect, or people in the limelight, that we think we want to be like, it's easy to maybe want to follow in someone else's footsteps or do something the way someone else did it. And certainly I've had a lot of guidance over the years, and that guidance has been really supportive and has helped me, but I've not always used it. So for me, it's been coming back to that place of doing what I know to be right and doing things my way, even if someone else doesn't really think my way is going to work or that my way is right, still making sure that I listen to that. So that authenticity is really a big piece, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's true, because it's going to be different for everyone, and we get to follow our own drive and our own heart. So I really like that. So if people want to work with you, what do you got going on right now in your business? How can people work with you?
Sure. So I have 3 different things that are sort of an ongoing way that people can connect. And one of those ways is with my 6-week program, which I call Heal Your Gut and Change Your Life, because of what we talked about before. And so in this 6-week program, I offer tools to get more clear on how you relate with food and how you relate with yourself through that process. And within the 6 weeks, we do go into a 3-week elimination diet. And so you have the opportunity to be guided through that practice of going into an elimination diet and really getting into lots of layers beyond just the food. So how we relate, again, in our life, it's usually mimicked in some way with food, whether it's around habitual actions or, there's lots we could get into with that. 6-week program to heal your gut and change your life. And that's offered in a self-guided program. I do run it as a group twice a year, or you can also do a customized program where you get more one-on-one attention. So the group program, or the 6-week program, is one thing. The second is monthly coaching. So doing a series where we connect twice a month and we do coaching in an ongoing way that's much more personalized. And then the most personalized offering I have is called an intensive. And so for people who are really especially challenged with a health condition and kind of don't know where to get started, I can come into your home and totally basically rework your living space so that you get rid of foods you don't want. We go grocery shopping together. You learn about what foods are going to be successful to keep in your home. I can teach you cooking, specific to your own diet or condition, and we can explore much, much more around that too. So we sort of do coaching while we're doing one-on-one work together, and that's 2 8-hour days we spend together.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It's so fun. I love it. And we can go into more than food too, which is really fun because, just like you mentioned something earlier about other chemicals that we come into contact with in our life, that's such an important piece that isn't always tapped into. But, if we're making clean choices with food, it's important to make clean choices in other areas of our life too.
That's great. Thank you. So just a couple final questions for you. I'm curious, in your own world right now, what maybe inspirational material you're reading or teachers you're following, what's really alive for you in your world?
What's really alive for me right now is what I would call soul work. And so I've been doing a lot of work around reconnecting with my soul in a really full way. I think that when we live in this modern world, it's easy to kind of take one step away, and that becomes further and further. So just reconnecting inward for me. And I did a really fantastic retreat this summer that helped initiate this, that was facilitated by a woman named Sarah Beek. And she has a great book called Red Hot and Holy.
Yes, I've read that.
And so I had a great retreat with her, and I'm really kind of in that work right now.
That's so awesome. Yeah, connecting with yourself. And I loved that book. It was really juicy.
Really juicy.
Good feminine energy to connect. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share today? Anything you'd like to say to be complete?
I find that in being an entrepreneur and creating balance in my life, I've had to really learn to honor myself. And that's something that I really feel is the thread in how I work with others, which is in some sense helping other people connect with how to honor themselves. And it just feels like a thread of everything we've talked about, including, coming back to what I'm working with in my own life right now, and this soul connection, and how I work with people, and how I keep my drive in balance, and how I maintain my health and my business. It's really about honoring who you are as an individual, and again, that word that I mentioned before, being really authentic to who you are, but honoring that, not resisting it, really honoring it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much. So I just really acknowledge you for joining with me today and sharing such a wealth of information. I feel like people watching can really, have a lot to think about and a lot of resources to go to. So thank you for being you and doing the work that you do in the world, and just for being here and sharing yourself.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's great to see you in this way and share in this way. I appreciate it.
Good. All right. Well, blessings to you and goodbye.
Thank you.